Yeah, I got notification.
All right.
Recording.
Yeah. All right. Great. The recording has started then. All right. Let me share a short PowerPoint presentation with you first. So just a minute. So having it over here. Please, Tony, just tell once you see it. So.
Yeah, I have it here, but it's not in presentation mode.
Yeah, I'm trying to have it. Oh yeah, yeah. Now it should be there.
Yeah, or we see the overview, not the actual slide.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Something strange happening. Let's do so that I simply then have it like this, and I'll put it because there are some technical issues now. There are several screens in my room here, because we are about to move at the ministry as well. So some new systems here. So hopefully you can anyway see this. So I'll put it in a bit larger. Can you still see it, right?
I can still see it. It might be better to just show the without sharing it.
Sorry, I didn't get it.
So what I see now is the slide with the forest value, but I also see the next slide. So
really?
Yeah.
How come?
So because you have multiple screens open.
Yeah, they are.
It's a guiding.
Yeah, they are.
So if you just maybe if you're having trouble.
Let me stop sharing and I'll try to do it again. Yeah.
Sorry to jump in. Mika, maybe you could try to click this näyttöasetukset icon on the top when you share it, and then just select the different mode. Usually that.
All right, and then I can only have this computer screen here, so that will perhaps solve the entire issue. So I don't use these multiple screens because I have 3 actually here in my computer. So just a moment, yeah.
All very
thanks for the advice, Mika. All right, yeah, I'll try to do it again. Yeah. Oh, still showing several screens, right?
Yeah, see what you get if you do. You see the näyttöasetukset on
the top?
Yeah,
I do. Yeah. Oh, sorry. There are some other things coming up. Vaihda. Is it better now?
It's
still same.
I think it's acceptable. I think we can.
It's acceptable. Yeah, let's not waste time with this. This is a short one, so perhaps better simply go forward with this one. So short introduction to the project of ForestValue2 with innovating forest-based bioeconomy. And actually then on the next slide, so there we have, let's see if it's even switching then between these things. Okay, here we go. So this explains about the duration and total budget of the entire process. So this is a Horizon Coordinated Support Action. We started with this initiative 1st of 1st 23, and it's lasting until the end of 27 with a total budget of roughly 2.2 million euros coming from the European Commission. And then about the project objectives. So I won't start reading all this loud, but we have two topics here which we are aiming to contribute. And then what is more important perhaps for you is about the project objectives. We have 4 main objectives. First one is the identification of common research and innovation priorities agreed among the participating national and regional R&D programs in the area of forest-based bioeconomy. And the second one is the implementation of a joint call resulting in the funding of transnational collaborative R&D projects. And then third one, implementation of other joint activities. And fourth one is this multi-actor approach in addressing global challenges, including the relevant contribution to the SDGs. And about the consortium in brief, so this ForestValue2 brings together 14 owners and managers of national and regional REI programs in 11 EU member states and in 1 associated country, which is Norway. And what is perhaps good to know is especially that 6 of the partners come from the so-called widening countries, and at the same time representing the BioEast initiative. I don't know how well you are aware of this initiative, but nevertheless, so ForestValue2 is expected to address then improving access to excellence through a portfolio of actions that aim at building up RNI capacities, especially in EU13 and Ukraine and Republic of Moldova. And this is to enable them to advance the competitive edge at the European and international level. And during this first year, so we have implemented a joint call, and this is with an aim to support transnational collaborative systems approach that will produce knowledge to support the best possible use of forests and forest resources, and at the same time balancing with the multiple benefits for society, climate, environment, and the economy. And the rationale of the call was addressed through two themes. First one is this resilient, sustainable forest systems management, and the second one, sustainable timber building systems. And with this total available budget, so 4 proposals were selected for funding, and more information is available on our website. And just to add here, so during the first phase of Forest Value, meaning Forest Value 1, so we had 2 calls implemented, and the second call, which was actually launched in 21. So there we have 8 projects running from this call as well. And then about the open research, how it's linked to ForestValue2. Well, as you know, so any Horizon Europe project is entitled to certain aspects of open research elements, and this is stipulated in the grant agreement we have signed together with the European Commission. But this is what we have stated actually in our work plan, so that the information from the network will mainly be targeted at industry, researchers, European, national and regional decision makers and advisory bodies, but will also address then issues of interest to the general public. And this is where we have defined that it will contribute to the following expected impacts of the call. First one is the improved knowledge for policymaking. Then we have this more open and inclusive research innovation system. But then the last 2 ones are increased capacity in the EU RNI systems to conduct open science. And the last one is improved capacities within the EU RNA system to conduct open science. And with these short words, so I would welcome you all to the event and wish you a pleasant and interesting afternoon with these affairs. And I didn't introduce myself, but nevertheless, so being the project coordinator of the efforts, so here you got my contact information. If there's anything, so please just let me know anytime. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Mika. Really appreciate that. So I think everybody has a strong idea of how we came together here today and what we hope to do. So without any further delays, I'll ask Sam, if you're with us, to present on the open research, the ORE and your platform.
Thanks, Tony. As you handed over, I realised, in fact, that I've got my share button greyed out. Which isn't very helpful. Sorry, I literally only just spotted that. I
think Mika's able to.
Actually, Mika should promote you just to the presenter. Yeah, there.
Yeah. So it should pop up for you now in a second.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Got it now.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Mika.
Great. So hopefully now you can see my slides.
Perfect.
Fabulous. Yeah, so first and foremost, thank you so much for inviting me to talk today. My name's Sam Hall. I'm an associate publisher for F1000. So F1000 are the publisher or the platform provider for Open Research Europe, which we'll be discussing today, as well as kind of like the broader benefits of open research, as well as its kind of place within the larger research environment. So in terms of the contents of my presentation, I'll start with like the broad principles of open research and then move on into the background and aims of the Open Research Europe platform, which has been developed in partnership between F1000 and the European Commission. And as European Commission grantees, you can publish on for free, and how that published article will look on the ORE platform, what kind of content can be published on ORE as well. So it's not just a case of publishing your concluding research articles, but also incrementally you can use the platform to produce or to publish more granular aspects of your research as well. I'll be talking as well about article collections, so how we kind of curate these different products of research, and also putting it into a larger context in terms of how Open Research Europe contributes to the wider movement of reforming research assessment. So to start off with an introduction to open research, some of you may already be familiar with these principles, but I thought it'd be beneficial just to get everyone up to speed. Broadly speaking, open research refers to making all results freely accessible to all. So this isn't just the concluding article of a research project, but also the methods and data which underlie that research and that article, as well as the collaboration and communication between researchers. So a classic example of this would be the interaction between reviewers and authors in the process of actually developing that research article, and making that conversation transparent for the benefit of all. And this is in contrast to the traditional publishing model, which typically is on subscription-based journals and can clearly limit access to not just the conversations between reviewers, but also the research article itself, of course. So that may mean that if a person wants to access that particular article, they'll need a subscription, or they'll need to pay for that individual article. So obviously open research in that principle makes it equitable across all readers to access the research article, but also the conversation that's had between researchers. And this is a general move away, it's gathering momentum over a number of years now towards open research and away from subscriptions. And this has resulted in the increasing use of pre-printing. So pre-printing broadly is submitting a version of your submitted manuscript on a preprint service that can be read immediately before peer review. And that enables the early sharing of research, so that people may build upon that research immediately, and authors can also get credit for the work they've done as soon as possible. So the growing support for open science and open research has been reflected very broadly within national and international policies and funding agencies and governments, not across Europe, but across the world as well. So generally speaking as well, the author benefits that you have of adopting an open research approach is that you can be firstly assured that you're fully compliant with funder mandates. So as we've spoken about before, you'll be mandated to publish open access with your European Commission funded grant. But by pursuing open research, principally, you can also be assured that you're not just meeting that funder mandate, but you're actually going beyond it as well, meeting the highest principles of open science and open research. There's greater transparency in the research process as well. There's increased visibility for you as researchers. It means that there's more likelihood that your research will get read, resulting hopefully in greater impact as well, not just by other researchers, but hopefully in the use in policies, for example. And all of that is measurable and demonstratable through the various metrics that we offer through Open Research Europe, which I'll touch on in a minute. There's greater efficiency for your research grant, because as a platform, we don't actually ask for any fees from your grant or from your institution. It's all directly covered by the Commission. So this makes it more scalable, it makes it more cost effective for you, and hopefully results in more citations. And there's greater collaboration as well, greater collaboration opportunities for yourself, but also for yourself and for the reviewers that you may interact with, but also for others to actually understand your research, build upon different aspects of it, and hopefully that research goes further as a result. So going into the background specifically of Open Research Europe, as I said, it was launched in March 2021 in collaboration with the European Commission and F1000. So this was following a tender by the European Commission in 2019, and it's initially for a contract of 4 years. We've since renewed, so F1000 have got the contract until 2026, so we'll be a platform provider at least until that point. And the motivations behind the European Commission developing this platform is to embody those principles of open research that I've just mentioned. So that includes the early sharing of research, that all underlying data that's used to produce that research is also linked to from the article into trusted open data repositories as well. There's an open peer review model, which means that the identities of the reviewers are known to the author, and the author's identity is known to the reviewers, and also that the readers can actually read the comments made by the reviewers and the verdicts that they've delivered, as well as any correspondence between the authors and reviewers as well. It's an author-led model. So this means that as an author or as a project, you can decide what of your research you consider to be most worthy of publications. This means you don't have to concern yourself with novelty or fitting into a particular journal scope. You decide, and on principle, we would only judge that based on the reviewer comments. There's no editorial board which are making decisions before it reaches peer review. So in that respect, yeah, you can be 100% confident that what you're publishing or what you're submitting to the platform is of your motivations and not other people's. We do have a scientific advisory board. They don't make any editorial decisions, but they do represent various research areas across the platform to ensure that we're offering ample coverage in these areas as well, and to act as champions, I suppose, within these areas and promote the platform further. We use article level metrics as indicators of quality. So rather than use the impact factor as the most prominent measure of quality, we offer metrics on an article level, so it demonstrates the intrinsic value of that research being published rather than the venue that it's published on. So in principle, we don't have an impact factor, and I'll be talking more broadly about the reasons why this may be, but we believe that by presenting article level metrics, this is a true indicator of quality. It's transparent and cost effective. So as a publisher, F1000 charges the European Commission 820 euros per article published. But again, you don't have to concern yourself with that because it's already covered as part of your as part of the agreement with the European Commission. It's also, in creating Open Research Europe, we want to demonstrate that open research publishing is a sustainable practice, and one that will grow over time. We've already got over 700 articles published on the platform since its launch, and we're seeing submission rates grow very quickly as well over time. And eligibility criteria is including to grow as well. So whereas until recently, only Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe funded projects could be published on the platform, now any project associated with the European Commission and its multiple kind of schemes, and even European Commission staff themselves can submit to the platform. So if you're associated with the Commission, it's likely that you'll be able to publish on the platform. So this is how the open research publishing model works, and this is a publishing model which F1000 kind of pioneered, and it's one that we use across multiple different funder platforms, and one which the Commission have adopted for Open Research Europe. So working from left to right, when you submit your research to the platform, it's a single web form, and that's where you get to fill in the metadata, you get to choose the research area, link out to any data which is used for the research as well. And once that's submitted, once you've hit that submit button, it'll be collected by our editorial team. And they'll undertake a number of thorough pre-publication checks. So this includes just checking policy guidelines, ethical standards are adhered to, and any research practices associated with your field have been followed as well. They'll also be checking for any plagiarism, and most recently as well, we're checking for AI, the use of AI in generating manuscripts. So we want to ensure that even at that stage, we're only receiving the highest standard of quality research. And if there's any queries or any doubts which the editorial team wants to raise, they'll get back in touch with the submitting author. And once any queries or clarifications have been made and they've been cleared, that's when the article goes online. So it goes back to this idea of pre-printing, where we want to publish your research before it actually starts peer review, so it can be shared as early as possible. It's immediately typeset and published with the DOI. and so that means that people can read it, cite it, they can discover it as well because it's been indexed on Google Scholar. But it's important to clarify at this stage as well that once it has been published on Open Research Europe, it can't be published elsewhere. So one of the early kind of difficulties we had when we were first starting to talk about the platform is that people misinterpreted it as a repository, and it's important to clarify that it's not a repository. So whereas a repository would mean that you could publish elsewhere because it's not being peer reviewed, this is equal to a journal publication because it will be peer reviewed, and the peer review takes place once the article's already online. So expert reviewers are invited for review, and we check again their eligibility, their level of expertise within the field in which your article is placed. And you may also, incidentally, you may nominate those reviewers if you wish. So you can nominate up to 5 reviewers. Again, that just makes it more author-led. We check for any conflict of interest if necessary as well. But we believe that as authors, you should have at least the opportunity to volunteer reviewers. And once those reviewers have been invited and agreed and submitted their reports, their names and their comments we published alongside the article online, and any resulting articles, or I should say, sorry, that any comments made that the author should then take into account to make revisions to the article, and each version of that article we published online as well, so people can actually see how that article has been developed over time in response to the various rounds of review. And once we consider the article to be past review, that's when it's sent to other indexers. So it's automatically drawn out of our kind of database into the databases of the likes of PubMed, Scopus, Dimensions, for example, as well as more specific kind of subject-orientated indexes like InSpec, for example, within engineering. So looking at open peer review a little bit more, when reviewers provide, or when reviewers are nominated, they must provide their name and affiliation, so we can check that they're obviously associated with an academic institution or research institution. They must also identify any conflicting interests, and these interests will be displayed on the platform as well. The review reports will be published alongside the article. They can also be citable, or they can be cited. So this means that the reviewers actually get more credit for the work they do. So it's an extra incentive for them to partake in this particular model of open peer review. And also their review status, the verdict that they've delivered, will also be published alongside the platform. And these come in 3 different categories. So the first one is approved, which means that the scientific content of the article is very sound. Any improvements which need to be made, they're only minor, they're only advised, they're not absolutely necessary. Whereas approval reservations may mean that the conclusion of the article is scientifically sound, but there are revisions which need to be made in the body of the articles. This may be in the methodology, for example, and it may just be clarifications which the reviewers strongly advise them to be made before the article is approved. And not approved means that the article is unsound in its conclusions, and there's fundamental flaws which undermine the findings of the article. But it's important to note at this stage that even if an article has received a not approved verdict, it remains on the platform. So this isn't like a reject decision in the traditional sense for journal model, where you then may take the article elsewhere. The article stays in the ecosystem until hopefully that article meets the threshold of quality that we're looking for in order for the article to pass peer review. So what we are looking for is either 2 approved verdicts, 2 ticks, or 1 approved verdict with 2 approval reservations, so 1 tick and 2 question marks. And this is how a published article looks on the ORE platform. So as you can see on the left-hand side, this is very similar, as you'd expect, to many online research articles. What differs is the fact that in this blue tab, for example, it shows the status, the review status of the article. So in this case, the article's already been revised. And in this parenthesis, it adds further clarity. So it's version 2, and it's already received 2 approved verdicts. So actually, in this case, it's actually flown through peer review. And you can see on the top left, the metrics that we've included. So immediately you can see it's got how many views it's got, how many downloads, and how many citations, but also the collections and gateways that's included in. So we use collections and gateways as a way of curating content, and we can add content quite flexibly in and out of these gateways. These gateways and collections can exist on like a topic level or a funding level, or even kind of an event level as well. So we often curate content around particular research events and conferences. And yeah, again, we can create this in a very flexible way according to the needs of that particular group. And below this is the abstract. And of course, if you just scroll down, you see the typical components of any other research article. What's different, what's distinctive from our platform is the open peer review panel on the right-hand side. So at the very top, you can see that the article's already received 2 approved status. And they actually received these in version 1 of the article. So as I say, it passed peer review in the first instance. So perhaps actually this is one of the best example to show you. But if it hadn't done, then you'd see a variety of different verdicts here. And because the article's actually already passed peer review, the authors have still taken into account the comments that have been made from the reviewers, and they've still implemented those changes or updated the manuscript. So it's important to note in that sense that you always have the flexibility to update your research, even if it's past peer review. So it's seen as kind of a living document that you can continuously update, and the reader will be informed about any updates to that article as well. And yeah, so with the gridding of this as well, you can see 1 and 2 at the top, and this refers to the reviewers' identities directly, which includes their institution as well as their ORCID IDs if they provided it. And below this, we have a comment section as well. So this allows anyone, whether they're an academic or not, they can create a user profile on Open Research Europe, and they can sign in to comment on the article. And again, this is another principle of open research, is that it encourages citizen science, so anyone can interact with research and add their contributions if they wish through commenting. And this page demonstrates the amount of article metrics that we provide. So we provide article views and downloads through the Open Research Europe platform itself, but also through Zenodo. So all articles that are submitted by Open Research Europe also scrape by Zenodo, so they appear on the Zenodo repository, which again is European Commission associated, and we can kind of total those views up as well to get a bigger picture, as to how widely read or how many times the article has been read. We have citation metrics from Dimensions, PMC, Scopus, and Crossref as well, and these are broken down by version. Discussion metrics, so these are social metrics, including Twitter, Wikipedia citations, and interesting as well, we include YouTube mentions, which I'm still not sure how that's calculated, but on articles which have been mentioned on YouTube, that's also pulled. And also through citation managers such as Mendeley. We also show cumulative views over time. So you can show how your article is, how many times it's been viewed since and when, since when the article has been published, and below that, where in the world the article's been read as well. So this kind of heat map demonstrates precisely where it's been read and how many times. So in this example, in North America especially, it's been read a great deal, and that's indicated by the darker blue tone. So what can be published on ORE? As I said, we are looking for research which isn't just the concluding article, but also more granular aspects that may be produced during your research project. And this is kind of summarized in this table. On the left-hand side, you can see all the different article types that we offer, and along the top, how these map onto different subject areas. What's important to note is that although these articles may vary in length and granularity and everything, they all go through the same research process or the same publishing process that I showed you earlier. They're all fully peer-reviewed, they're all fully citable, they're all indexed, and we always ask for the data underlying these articles to be submitted to an open data repository, and they all go through those strenuous checks by our pre-publication team as well. And it's important to note that you can publish as many of these article types as you wish associated with your grant, and also following the conclusion of your research project as well. So we offer complete flexibility in that respect. And we kind of see it as this kind of process as well. So when you're developing your research project, you may want to think about various checkpoints in which you actually submit these different article types. So at the very beginning of a research project, when you're reviewing literature, that might be when you publish a review paper, looking at the kind of broader research landscape within your area. And then moving on to the planning, it might be a methodology article or a study protocol. And then moving into the data collection, that's key for data notes. And briefly, what data notes are short essays which describe a data set and describe how it may be used by others. So yeah, if you've already completed your data collection, you may already have deposited that in an open data repository. That would be a good time to publish a data note, so others may discover it and build upon it immediately, as well as you get credit for that work immediately. And then moving on into the analysis stage is probably most likely when you're producing your concluding research articles and brief reports as well. But any of these article types can be published at any stage of the research project. And talking to researchers as well, many times I talk to them after they've actually already concluded their research project, and they find they still have pieces of research that they think would be worthwhile in publishing, such as a data note, for example. So it's a good way of kind of rounding up any kind of research that you think is left, which hasn't necessarily made it to the main concluding piece, but is still worthy of sharing. So talking about article collections a bit more, this is an opportunity to maximize the visibility of work within Open Research Europe, because it's such a broad platform spanning all different research disciplines. It's important for us to kind of curate these at different levels. It also offers opportunities such as ForestValue to kind of group all of that research together into one place, so you can kind of showcase that research. You can direct communities towards it, and you can kind of give it an overarching kind of theme and context. And some of the examples here are actually cost action projects, which we have on the platform. And I'm sure I'll be sharing these slides following the meeting, but you can link through to these or explore them on the platform, and you'll see as well that we can have advisors for each of these collections as well, to add extra authority and certification to the collections. But as I say, it's a way of us to kind of group all of that knowledge together into one place. So it's a great touching point for all of that research. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about research assessment. So as I mentioned at the top, Open Research Europe doesn't have an impact factor, and that's a position that the Commission have consciously taken, because they want to move away from that culture of research assessment being based purely on the venue in which research is published. And this is kind of summarized in this report, which was published a few years ago, an EC scoping report. And some of the recommendations coming from this report includes qualitative judgment with peer review. So you're not just making accept, reject decisions unnecessarily. You have to substantiate the reasons why you've made that decision, and also provide worthwhile comments, constructive comments, which can be useful not just for the understanding of the author to improve their research, but also for the reader. Rewarding the quality and potential impact of research that meets the highest standards of ethics and integrity. So yeah, by demonstrating all the different metrics at which the research can be measured, I suppose, or the impact of that research can be measured, that demonstrates ethics and integrity of that research. And considering the value of diversity of research activities, so not just thinking about the concluding article, but also the different processes and methods that go into that, and ensuring that there's no research waste, principally. From the Commission's perspective, they want to get as much return from their investment as possible, and they see that by making processes transparent, and valuing teamwork as well, and supporting different career paths. So not all people that pursue publications are necessarily academics or are in academic careers. There's many different people that are in receipt of European Commission grants, and by valuing different research outputs equally, hopefully that means it's a fairer and more equitable system, even for those that are outside of the kind of traditional career track for academics. So to highlight some of the features that Open Research Europe has to link up with research assessment, we use article level metrics as indicators of quality, and also open data. Our open data policy ensures that research is transparent and reproducible. So hypothetically, anyone hopefully could pick up the research that's been published on Open Research Europe and reproduce it to show its added value and eligibility. It's an author-led model which enables researchers to decide which parts of the research are most suitable for publication, and they can do this through a wide variety of article types throughout the project lifecycle, even following its conclusion. We champion open peer review and transparency between authors and reviewers, and also offering recognition to reviewers, which is often, in the more traditional manner, quite an invisible process. We also support the credit taxonomy, which I should have covered earlier, to be honest, but this is basically a taxonomy which means that each author that's associated with the research submitted to the platform is credited with their contribution to that research and to that article, so that it's transparent, not just so that the authors get credit for the work that they do and yeah, the nature of the contribution, but also that there's no that it's ethical, that authors' names just aren't being tagged on for the sake of it, that their contributions are acknowledged and demonstrated. So yeah, to conclude, Open Research Europe is efficient. We publish articles in a matter of days rather than weeks because of the pre-peer review model. It's backed up by an international scientific advisory board. It's impactful. Immediate open access means that people can read your article as soon as possible, can begin citing it as well, and this will be demonstrated through article level metrics. We also have open data, which demonstrates and enables reproducibility and reuse, and it's hopefully for you as authors, researchers, it's stress-free. So you don't have the administrative burden of fees, and you can be absolutely assured that you're being fully compliant with the European Commission's mandate for open access, but not just that, but you're meeting the highest principles of open research as well. So that concludes my presentation. I'm very much looking forward to hearing the other presentations and getting into the discussion at the end too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. That was great, very useful. Great overview of your platform and some of the advantages to it, particularly like the speed element and the pre-publication. That's a very useful asset to have there. Before we move to our next segment, just to acknowledge that this is a collaboration with the CRESTIMB team who've helped out. Darius and sorry, I've just drawn a blank. Stefania, sorry. So thanks very much for all your help there. And we are moving to some of the best practice examples. So we have Maria Polanski, who is going to go through her presentation and talk a bit about some insights into open research and how we can foster international collaboration. So if we have Dr. Maria.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Wonderful. I'm going to try and share my presentation. There we go, that should work. Okay, can everyone see that now?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So I'd like to thank you all for this invitation. It's great to be here, and thank you, Sam, for your really thorough presentation. And it's great to see the EU doing so much on open access publishing, and especially also assessment and peer review. It's great news. And I'd like to lead with an apology that I have been given 15 minutes to give this presentation, which is understandable and a little bit painful because I can talk about these things for literal hours. But I will give my 15-minute presentation, and then I'm afraid I'm going to have to immediately log off because I have another conference. So I apologize for that. And I know it's rude, and I hate when other people do it, so I hate having to do it, but today is a crazy day, so my apologies. Okay, so Sam gave you a really great overview of some of the practical tools for open science, and what I'm hoping to do here in the, again, 15 minutes that I have is give you a high-level introduction to the concepts of open science and to what we're really trying to do. Now, I work with a number of international organizations, including UNESCO and CERN and NASA, and I'm on a whole bunch of committees where we're bringing together literally everyone, every continent except for Antarctica, maybe, although there are polar scientists on these committees. And I think it's important because we're actually bringing together everyone. And just to give you a background of where I'm coming from, I'm coming to you today from the traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people, the unceded territories that today house the province of Nova Scotia in Canada. So I'm originally a European. My last name gives it away pretty starkly. So of Polish origins, but I am now part of this very international movement, including countries that have historically been excluded from these processes. So mostly the South, well, the global South and Asia. And it's wonderful to see us all coming together and trying to achieve this. And I think particularly when we talk about ecology and forests and resources that are largely available also, well, in Europe, we have fewer forests now because we cut them down. So it's important, I think, to really bring in the global community. And I've mentioned working with UNESCO. So I think, again, we've had the previous presentation wonderfully focused on open access, but I want to show you the actual UNESCO framework for what open science is. And I have been on more meetings than I can count where officials from places very high up would stress that every single part of the circle is important. We have open scientific knowledge, which as researchers, I'm a former researcher myself, is where we tend to focus things. It's particularly the open publications and the open research data. Some of us think about open educational resources. An example of a researcher I've recently worked with where they've published an open access textbook, which over 3 years has saved at least $1 million Canadian for students. And this is an open access textbooks that has been now used all around the world. And open educational resources is something I don't think we talk enough about. It's not just about the price saving, but also the quality of the material that goes in there and the ability for researchers to retain rights. We've had a little bit about, well, we all sort of probably know a little bit about the problems with the current research publishing industry. When it comes to textbooks, quite frankly, the situation is possibly even worse. So there you go. There's open source software and source code, open data, and open hardware. Open hardware is it's a fledgling field, but I think it's fascinating. For example, there's a big push for every piece of hardware funded by the federal government in the US to be open hardware. So basically you can buy the parts in more or less your hardware store, not necessarily always, but it's not proprietary, and you don't need a proprietary technician to come in and help you fix it for $100,000 every single time. The price for things like microscopes has gone down by 80 to 90% using open hardware. Those are real numbers. It's astounding how much you can get done if you do it in an open framework. There's open science infrastructures, which can be both virtual and physical. We've literally, the presentation before me was an open science, virtual open science infrastructure. The physical ones are things like telescopes and things like, again, microscopes. There are a lot of really smart people that don't live within a 50-kilometer radius of Boston, Massachusetts. And it just so happens that a lot of the physical infrastructure is in places like Boston, Massachusetts, or telescopes are in places that are very far away, and you have to have a lot of money to fly there. If you make this stuff open, you actually make it available to people with good ideas, and not just people with good ideas and a lot of money. I think the equity aspect is really important there, and it's not just because of the equity, it's because it's good for all of us if all the smart people in the world can actually do this science, and not just the smart people who happen to be living in developed countries. Because we have a lot of problems to solve on this planet. You know, when we're not curing cancer, we should be fighting climate change. There's a lot to be done, and the more minds we can put to this, the more likely we are to solve these problems. The great aspect of open access is that researchers in countries where there are institutions, or even in institutions, quite frankly, not just countries. I live in a resource depleted part of Canada. It is still a highly developed country, but I work with institutions that really do not have money to pay open access fees. And they do not have money for subscriptions, which can be up to 80,000 American dollars for a single journal, right? So if all of us were at the same level of knowledge, if all of us knew the same thing because we could all read the same papers, think how much quicker these things would happen. When it comes to forest ecology and generally topics that involve humans, there are two other parts of this open science circle that I'd like to mention, and I am now a third through my presentation, so apologies if I'm speaking quickly, but I'm trying to get a lot of information out at you. There's the open engagement of societal actors, and it's engagement, not just here is a thing, please fill it out for me. It's actually meaningful engagement, and not just using people to fill out your questionnaires. There's an element of respect. There's an element of being able to translate from academies into actual languages that people can understand. And there's an element of actually wanting to listen to what other people have to say, even if they don't have a PhD, which sometimes can be a problem for researchers. A huge shift, for example, in the medical sciences was introducing patient partners, whereby previously a doctor would decide which aspect of a disease they will study. The framework is changing now, and before they decide on what they're going to study in this disease, they actually talk to people with lived experience of that disease. It seems like a pretty obvious thing to do. It was not previously done. I mean, doctors and physician clinicians made these decisions on their own without actually speaking to people who were supposed to be the end beneficiaries of their research. So engaging with communities, both people affected, but also just local communities. That's the other part, the open dialogue with other knowledge systems. Now, I know it doesn't pertain so much to Europe, especially the indigenous peoples. There's not a lot of indigenous peoples left in Europe. The situation is very different in North America, Africa, Asia, and South America, places where, you know, forests are still there, and generally science is done. The assumption that the things that have been written in research papers are the only way, of knowing the world is a not correct assumption. We have spectacular examples just in the last year here in North America, where both the date of the peopling of North America and wildfire management has been shown to be incorrect in terms of the way Western science was perceiving it. Indigenous peoples here in North America have been giving us a different date for the peopling of North America and have been telling us to manage wildfires in not the European way for literal decades, if not centuries at this point. And this last year has really brought up a lot of evidence in the Western scientific method to show that this has all along been true. And it's, again, important to think how much faster we could have moved if we were open to a dialogue, an actual dialogue with these other knowledge systems. This also includes marginalized scholars. In Europe, there's a war going on at the moment. That's a very effective way of marginalizing scholars, including people who would not otherwise be included, is a way of enriching the research you do and making sure it's actually the best research. None of this is just being goody two-shoes for the sake of being, a nice person. It is, at the end of the day, for the sake of research being the best research it can be, because you're actually putting all the best minds to work and not just the minds that fit a very particular limited scope. I mean, historically, it's very recent that women are allowed to get PhDs. I'm from Poland. Poland's most famous researcher, most people think she's French, Maria Skłodowska-Curie. It's because she had to go to France to get a PhD. In Poland, she was told, sorry, if you have a uterus and your brain, that we don't believe you can do a PhD, right? So the historical exclusion of half the society is still very recent history. So let's think who else we're excluding now and how we could actually improve science if we didn't do that. So a version of this slide has already been shown by Sam, so I have 5 minutes. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I think what's important is the global impact, also in terms of collaboration. If you make your science open, if you make your data open, there's a ton of bibliometric research now to show that not only will it be read around the world, you look at publications or journals opening up their archives, and the readership numbers soar in the hundreds of percents from Asia and Africa and South America, the places where the institutions don't necessarily have access to the kind of resources that are needed to pay for these subscriptions. It's hundreds of percent in terms of increased readership. These are potential collaborators. Same with your data. If you look at recent urban ecology, or just generally look at ecology papers, right? There's hundreds of names in the authorship list. These are names of people who have made their data openly available. And this data has been used to conduct these bigger meta-analyses. This is something that is very quantifiable and happening already. These kinds of large collaborations and international connections that are made just because people can actually access your papers and look at your data. So just to very quickly finish up, I have 4 minutes, and what I want to leave you with is the idea that open science, yes, it's really important to make your data open, and what's more, the EU makes you make your data open. I'm very grateful for that, or not necessarily open, but just deposit it somewhere. It makes your public, it definitely encourages you to make your, and forces you in some cases, to make your publications open. That's wonderful. But there's more to this, I think, and what we're trying to do, and what the EU is in fact trying to do, is something more than just that. We're trying to make a shift in scientific culture, and I think Sam has already touched on this, and thank you for that, where it's not, we're moving away from the publish or perish model. We're moving away from the huge retraction numbers. We're moving, just, I don't need to tell you this, you've all seen the recent scandals. I mean, it's been in the regular media, not just the scientific media, right? Room temperature superconductivity is a great example, twice retracted from a top journal, right? What we're trying to do is publish really quickly so we don't get scooped, so we can, and it needs to be in a high impact journal so we can get the next grant. That's how we've been taught to do science now. And again, as a former researcher, and I do this, I ask this every time, how many of us researchers went into research because we wanted to publish high impact papers to get more grants? And the average number is 0. That's not why people go into research. They go into research because they want to increase our knowledge about something, study something really really detailed and find out more about a topic that interests them. And the way we're doing science now is not conducive to that. What's worse, it's conducive to this huge retraction problem. It's conducive to the reproducibility crises we're in the midst of, the paper mill crises we're in the midst of, and the fake authorship crisis. All of this is the result of how we assess researchers and therefore force them to publish. So open science means we're trying to shift away from that, do a U-turn back to the time where, you know, we can just study things, except it's not just rich white men doing it now. It's a greater community of researchers who get to just sit and research things. It's moving from competition to collaboration, where we think of other people and other data and our data as a way of increasing the general knowledge and not just as a way of getting the next grant and the next paper. And what open science, specifically also the way that the platform we just heard about does peer review, and what open data makes it possible to do is moving away from science as a product to science as a process, right? It's not just that one paper and then we move on. The data is there. It's a living thing. We actually get to stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Which is a problematic, sexist, and racist term, quite frankly, if you look into the history of it. But what we're actually able to do is use the data because it's there. And open methods, for example. We're not just trying to fish things out from a paper. We're actually able to build on that research. And then finally, science for select to science for all. We're not just making it possible for those people with a privileged background in countries that have access to resources. We're making it possible for anyone who wants to do this. Thank you very much. Just leaving you with a view of beautiful Nova Scotia there. It actually is this sunny right now, although that is not the view outside my window. And I wish you a very good meeting. It's been great so far. Again, my apologies, but I literally have to log off now. I'm so sorry. That's me.
Many thanks, Maria. I think you've left us with some really great insights and some thoughts there to mull over. So really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. Again, apologies.
It's okay, no problem. It'll be recorded. You can watch the rest of it later. I'm sure you can enjoy it then.
Thanks.
So thank you very much. Our next speaker, Dr. Rainer Krug from University of Zurich, will give a talk on how general open science principles are used in the intergovernmental science-based policy platform on biodiversity and ecosystem services to facilitate communication with policymakers in respect to transparency, accessibility, and reproducibility of the methods used. So, Rainer, please, if you could join us, and you want to share? Perfect.
Okay. Thanks a lot. And I've just realized I've given you a very long, very complicated title. Apologies for that. Next time I'll try to make it easier.
No problem.
Even I would have had serious problems reading that title. Okay. No. First, I would like to give a big thank you to Maria and Sam for providing that brilliant background to what I'm going to talk about. So my talk will be much shorter. And Maria raised some very, very important and essential points. And as we are not going to talk about that in detail, I just want to mention indigenous and local knowledge is really at the core of IPBES. It's at the beginning. It is one of the cornerstones of knowledge which is used in IPBES. And it plays an absolutely essential role, which we incorporated in all of the workflows recently in the policies as well. So I completely agree with you and thank you. I think it was very, very important to raise that point, even if it is not that relevant for Germany, but for Europe, sorry. But there are aspects which are relevant for Europe as well in there. Okay. Let's talk about IPBES. First of all, I don't know if all of you are familiar with IPBES, so I'm just giving you another long, complicated, difficult to read sentence. which is IPBES, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. It's an independent intergovernmental body established by states to strengthen the scientific policy interface for biodiversity and ecosystem services for the conservation of sustainable use of biodiversity, long-term human well-being, and sustainable development. I didn't write that description. The important point, it is going from the biodiversity on the one side up to human well-being and sustainable development. So it includes all the aspects of ecology, of ecosystem functioning, biodiversity, up to biodiversity services and sustainable use of biodiversity. And just to give you a very, very brief overview and mention the important points in the organization of IPBES, the important point for my talk is that IPBES consists of a group of experts which are working on the assessments, and experts which are sitting in task forces, and I'm one of them. I'm sitting in the task force for data and knowledge management. And on the other side, you have the plenary, which consists of all countries which are members of IPBES. The plenary then tasks IPBES in a decision to do assessments to certain topics. There was a global assessment, which was the biggest one you most likely are familiar with. Then they started at the beginning with pollination assessment, regional assessments, and so on. And these assessments at the end, they have to be approved by the plenary. So the plenary has to unanimously approve these assessments. So how is open science implemented in IPBES? Well, first of all, we are the cornerstone of data management in IPBES is findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability, which are the FAIR principles, which are giving guidelines on how data should be managed in an open science compliant way. The second cornerstone, which I'm just going to mention, which falls into that area of indigenous and local knowledge, are the CARE principle, collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. These ones were devised as a counterweight to the FAIR principles to include aspects of interest and relevance for indigenous people in the management of their knowledge. I'm not going to go into detail into that one more. I just think it's an important point to consider when you're talking about data. The quality of the assessments is paramount. IPBES has good reputation, very good reputation on the quality of their assessments. It relies on a large source of different kinds of data, and that data is partly not open. But as I said, quality is paramount, and there is no way that the quality will be lowered. So we decided in the task force to have the need that data is findable. Even if it is not accessible for everybody, it needs to be findable. One needs to be able to trace it, and then one can get access to the data after that step. But it's not, in some cases, not openly available. We are trying to make all data openly available, and especially all workflows within IPBES. All these principles were codified in a data and knowledge management policy about 3 years ago. And one part of that data knowledge management policy are data management reports, which are detailing, written by the authors of the assessment, the process, how the data was obtained, how the data was analyzed and processed, so that this whole process is transparent and reusable. But why is IPBES following open science principles? Well, first of all, everybody's selfish, so we have very selfish reasons for that. The first one is transparency and reusability. being able to reuse code and data for new assessments. The global assessment, for example, will be repeated, and they're probably trying to reuse certain approaches and analysis methods in that new global assessment so that code can be reused, which is available. The second one is, and I mentioned that already, that the plenary has to approve the assessment, that to be able to defend the assessment, it needs to be transparent how the results were obtained. And that one is the core in the policy and in the data management within IPBES, that there is transparency down to the data, really how results, tables, figures were obtained. But there are also altruistic reasons. For example, for policymakers, they have the approach and methodologies used to come up with the results available. Then there's for scientists, that they can reuse the approaches which were used in IPBES to reassess them, to refine them at later stages. That's for educators, that they can use a resource of IPBES down to the methodologies, down to the data which has been used in education at different levels, up to high school and university education. And then last but not least, there are the data providers. We have a very intense cooperation with GBIF, for example, on provision of data flows, which is very, very much improved through the transparency in the handling of the data. But actually, looking at these reasons, they're actually also selfish, because it's everything in the interest of IPBES, that the policymakers have the information, that scientists have the information to follow up, which creates interest, educators, that people are educated in these assessments, that they are there, how they can be used, and also data providers. So I think most of them are really selfish reasons why open science principles are used in IPBES. So just running through, does it work? Transparency, yes, we have the data management reports, which are presenting in a transparent way how data was handled, what data was handled, presenting the results. Each of them has a DOI. Each figure in the assessment has a DOI with the accompanying code, how they were generated. So yes, transparency is there. Findability, it's the same. That is in the data management reports. The requirement is that the source of the data is provided there, either the data itself or the source of the data. Reusability, that's a tricky one, because actually when you look at it, it falls in both categories. On the one side, it is able to do, it is possible to reuse the data and the code, again, the data management reports. But on the other hand, what is reusable? What do we want from reusable? At which scale do we want to reuse it? That's a discussion which is ongoing and will be tackled in the next years, to come up with a more robust idea of the scale of reusability, because one can go back down to the hardware, really, to talk about reusability. And then areas where it was successful, the one is plenary in defending the assessments. That one was also successful, and there were quite a few cases where questions from the plenaries could be answered and addressed and by or through these data management reports. Science, does it work on the science front? We don't have any actual numbers, but it is very likely that this openness really promotes the reusability, accessibility of the code and the data itself. And the same applies not only for science, but also for educators, which we also have indications that it is working nicely. So the main point really is in the next steps, which need to be addressed. First of all, getting a better understanding and feeling of what reusability and reproducibility means in the context of IPBES. Then, without doubt, making it reusable, reproducible, increases the workload for the experts. And the experts do not have a huge amount of time. So an increased efficiency and lower workload is something which we are working towards to keep the same level of reproducibility, reusability, transparency, but through defining workflows really to make it more efficient, the whole process. And the last one is one point which is everybody talking about, and which we probably, hopefully, will talk about in the plenary discussion afterwards, which is AI. Because AI is, in my opinion, opening many, many questions in regards to open science, reusability, reproducibility, transparency. At all different levels, AI will make that whole process much, much more difficult, and one has to think carefully how it can be used in that context. And that's all I wanted to tell you. I'm open for questions. Leave it to the organizer if we address them now or during the plenary. Thanks.
Thank you, Rainer. I think we might just, for the interest of time, we're on time, which is great. So we can save the questions for the plenary. Thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation. I really liked the bit where you mentioned that policymakers are altruistic, and then was very disappointed when he said, no, actually, we're selfish. So you caught my attention there. But thank you. That was great. So what we are going to do now is we're going to move to a plenary discussion, and we're going to ask Mika, Sam, and Rainer, our participants in the plenary discussion, and we're going to pose a few questions, but we'll also have some time for questions at the end as well. So just to kick things off, and following on from your point, Rainer, and I'm sure it was a question certainly that was in my mind, and you raised it yourself, and we'll open it out for discussion here. How might advancements in technology, such as AI, influence the future of open research practices? I think it's something you were wanting to touch on there. If I could throw that out to the three participants. Rainer, you'd like to come in first, perhaps?
Yes. I mean, if you're looking particularly at AI advances now at the moment, there are two different fronts where they become, in my opinion, problematic or difficult to include in open workflows. The one is reproducibility. They are non-deterministic. So each time you're asking an AI, it will chatbot, LLMs in particular, which are used extensively in summarizing. For example, we are investigating as well, for example, for getting information out of abstracts of papers, giving different answers each time. So that's a reproducibility problem, which you really run into. Another aspect is really, okay, you can by now run your own LLMs, include the LLMs into your deposit for methodologies, so that these are really, you can rerun them after a certain time. But it is usually difficult because if you're doing more complex tasks, your LLMs get bigger, your AI models get bigger, and there's no way really that you can reproduce them, especially after they are updated. Their versioning is in other hands. So from that side, I think there are quite a few procedural problems or challenges, let's say challenges, in using them in the context of open research. The other one are obviously questions concerning hallucinations of the LLMs, which are more technical questions, which are really, really relevant technical questions. But I don't think that was a direction you were hinting at or going for.
Yeah, no, it's no, I think you've covered off the question very well. And I think it's certainly something that I think we've all seen more of. And I know, Sam, you touched on it also within your presentation around AI and screening for AI. I wonder, could you expand on that just a little bit more? How you've seen it increase, or your methods of detection, or how confident are you around those?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of detection, it's quite a simple process really, because as Raina touched on there, it's about kind of the predictability of these LLMs. So if the text that follows, if each word that follows the next word is kind of fluent and predictable, and there isn't, yeah, there's a way that AI can actually detect the AI, if that makes sense, because it's a model upon itself. So we can actually, in the same way that you may be familiarized, like Turnitin or something, in the way that a plagiarism tracker can highlight text and show its publication, or the chunk of that text being produced somewhere else, an AI detection tool can do exactly the same thing in terms of identifying the likelihood of that particular portion of text being generated by an AI LLM generator. So that's in principle how it works. It kind of flags up to a human eye, who'd be our editorial team, doing those pre-publication checks in our workflow. So that's not to say that we'd completely write off that particular submission, but it would enable us to signpost to the author any concerns that have been raised by the detection. So yeah, these models are actually these detections are quite similar to what we've used before, in terms of kind of scrape what's existing on the web and what existing models there are. And yeah, I mean, we have to, at this stage, anticipate AI as a bit of a threat rather than a kind of tool for research purposes at this stage. I mean, one of the big kind of concerns is that these AI models as well, they don't cite any sources, or there hasn't been a solution that I've seen that can actually reliably cite sources. So it might be that many publications are ingested within these AI systems and used to produce text, but the people that have actually produced that research aren't being cited. So it's actually quite harmful in that sense, that these models haven't really found what I've seen so far as a solution, because in that sense, it could actually, if there was a way of them reliably citing researchers for their work, then that could be a good thing. But at this stage, yeah, it needs a lot of work, and as I say, AI is something that we need to guard against through these detections until more reliable solutions are found, I think.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, no, that's very good. And again, I think you touched on what Rainer had mentioned around the hallucinations, and it's a real a problem area that I think we're going to face. So, but I suppose we have to use technology to fight technology, and those large language models as they get better and better. Mika, do you have any thoughts or you wish to add on it?
About the AI or in general, because I guess that we have already discussed the AI, and I totally agree what was said earlier. So, but when listening, thanks for the excellent presentations. And I'm not an expert in open science at all. So although obviously, so we have followed it very carefully, and there was in already that time when actually this ORE was launched in 21, was it, Sam? So. We organized for the first time one of these similar type of seminars we are having at the moment here, and it was very useful for the audience. And I've no clues of how many actually have, because that was also recorded, that how many people have actually followed that one. But nevertheless, so those times we had those discussions that which projects are eligible actually for this platform, and then it was more or less our initiative. We were discussing with the experts from this already platform that the Commission then decided to go for the eligibility for all those projects which are funded through this Horizon Europe or these grants, and that was of course a very remarkable achievement. But now I was wondering when Sam, you were discussing these article metrics, that because I don't know these other platforms how they work, but looking at how detailed your metrics are, so is it similar to with some other platforms, so that they produce that type of detailed metrics you are having there?
Yeah, so it's built from altmetric effectively. So a lot of the metrics are just generated through where the DOI has been mentioned.
Yep.
And that's how it's tracked through an API, and then we just surface those metrics. So I mean, going back to that makes it interoperable as well, right? So the fact that we use DOIs make it compatible with all these different citation trackers and tools, so that enables research to be monitored across all these different platforms as well, not just those that we use on our platform.
Right, and then you were discussing also this collection feature, and you mentioned that is something we could actually utilize for our process. So could you perhaps elaborate this a bit, so that for ForestValue there could be some defined element there, right?
Yeah, I think what might be beneficial actually is me sharing my screen again. So I'm just gonna just find a good example here. So yeah, a collection page effectively can just group together an article. It creates like a front-facing web page where you can describe a collection of articles, and this description can be as extensive as you like. I mean, this is actually quite a long one, but that can also like link out to other sources, etc. Just add context to the particular grouping, as well as some background as to the research area itself. And then we typically like to associate at least one advisor with the collection. So this would preferably be someone in the center of that network, or a figurehead, and that's what their role is. They won't be asked to necessarily perform any review functions unless they want to, or make any editorial decisions, but they may be asked to step in under rare occasions for editorial purposes. So yeah, that's one tab, and obviously this is a great splash page for you to share with others. And then with the browse function, it'll group the articles that are associated with that particular collection, and we can just, when an author submits their article to the platform, they can immediately associate it with a collection. But if they haven't done so, we can also do it retroactively as well. So it's very flexible in that respect. And if it's like a broad topic level collection, it might actually be that there's authors from outside of your network that publish research which can still be associated with the particular area. So it's fully flexible in that respect. And then from like a reader's perspective as well, they can track that particular collection. So they can then get email alerts as to when a new article has been submitted to that collection, or when a revised article has been submitted as well. So it's just a great way of, as I say, like grouping it, putting a string through all of this different research into one place.
Great, Sam. Grainer, did you wish to come in there?
Yes, I just have a question for clarification with these collections. They are only for papers or products published on Open Research Europe, is that correct? Or could one also build up a general one with other publications as well from outside?
Yeah, so yeah, the publications that are submitted during they're included within a collection are those that are featured on the Open Research Europe platform. However, you could, as this collection has done, you could link out to external sources within the description itself. But yeah, the actual browse function where the articles are listed in this fashion, they would have to be existing articles on ORE.
Thanks, Stan and Rainer. Would anybody like from the audience like to raise their hand to ask a question, or if there's I don't have visibility of the chat, Kathy. Perhaps there's some questions in the chat, or if anyone wishes to raise their hand. Mika, another Mika.
Yes. So I have a question, maybe two questions actually. So the first question is about this Open Research Europe. As the name implies, it's quite geographically located. So I'm a bit curious about the submissions. How many submissions or percentage of submissions come from regions outside of Europe? That's the first question.
I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but there's not many, because they need to be associated with European Commission research. So you do get consortia which have, which do include institutions outside of Europe, but this is on rare occasions. And often we'd only be tracking or recording, I think, the submitting author in their country. So yeah, it's fair to say it's minimal.
Okay.
But what I will say is that the European Commission, they're in the process of opening up the platform to more than just European Commission funded research. So over time, they hope to make the eligibility criteria completely inclusive of all countries and funders. But obviously, this is quite a high level discussion, which is only in its infancy. But it is one to watch, because, as I said at the very beginning, when we launched the platform, it's only Horizon Europe and Horizon 20. We've since widened the criteria further to include all European Commission associated research. So yeah, in the next iteration, it's likely that will include national funders at European level, and then beyond that, hopefully within other regions of the world as well.
Yeah, thank you. Another question I'm thinking about the citations and I understand the impact factor is not monitored or even established for this type of online journals, but I'm a bit curious about the citations and how they compare. Have you done some kind of evaluation how they compare to other open access publications, basically published at the current publishers networks or platforms?
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say there's a lot of variance. So it's something that I'd encourage people to explore when making their publishing decisions, as to how citations compare across different venues anyway. But we can only really look at dimensions data. That's probably the most reliable kind of cross analysis across different venues. And yeah, there is articles like the one that I showed earlier that had 20 citations in the couple of years since it's been published, but then there's a long tail of articles which have only picked up a few citations. And I think that's fairly typical of most venues, to be honest. You get those articles that really fly and pop, and then you get a long tail of ones and twos. So it's really difficult to make a kind of comparison. I mean, there's always going to be people that want to go to the high impact journals at the very top of their field. I mean, that's only natural in some ways, and then they kind of cascade down those venues. So it can be that sometimes we retrieve articles which have been rejected from impact factor journals, and we've published them. Or another way is that they may have published in impact factor journals, and they've needed to do this because of the particular research assessment criteria within their own national context, for example, and we completely respect that. But then there might be other elements of their research which they consider to be worthy of publication in those more kind of granular article types that I described earlier. So it can be that authors can kind of mix the best of both worlds, if you like. And even though we wouldn't necessarily endorse them publishing, or their main motivation being to publish with an impact factor, we do respect that sometimes they need to, and they can still pursue publishing other parts of their research with Open Research Europe as well.
Yeah, just a quick comment. So I'm all about open publishing and open data and all of this, but I think like the research evaluation and grant review and all of this should be somehow reformed at the same time to include more of this type of publications that are open access. That should be considered as a merit in my view, but that's my personal comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mika. That's a very interesting and valid point. Rainer, you had your hand raised? Did you wish to come in?
Yes, I would like essentially to pick up on what Mika said, because I like the idea of not having the impact factor. It goes in the right direction, but at the same time, it really poses problems for younger scientists who need publications, and in many cases, for many universities, they need publications in good journals, and good is usually defined as high impact factor. So how would you counter that argument that it is essentially promoting the publication of papers by established authors compared to young authors who need these publications really to be regarded in applications? And is there anything happening really, as Mika said, to change that whole process of impact factor, of valuing of impact factor over everything else?
Yeah, I mean, there is a culture developing, I think. More institutions are signing up to COARA, which is the Coalition to Advance the Reform of Research Assessment, and that's modeled on the same principles that I highlighted in my slide. Unfortunately, it's a cultural thing, so and as a result, different research assessors are going at different paces to one another. So just to think of an example, in Italy, for example, there's still a huge emphasis on impact factor there. And there's, we can only try and change the direction of travel, and it's a hard push. And it's kind of like how open access as a publishing model was first incepted, and it was so disruptive to begin with. It was a really hard push up the hill, if you like. And then, we got to this critical mass where open access publications exceeded subscription publications, and suddenly now it's more acceptable, and it's more, the concerns that people had initially about open access are more abated now, and they're better understood. And I think it's the same with research assessment, that I take your point that particularly with early career researchers, where their position with academia is so precarious, then they do have to lean into the existing culture somewhat, and perhaps in that respect they can perhaps seek guidance from their more senior members as to how to approach that. And we can't really advise what to do. We can only offer this venue as an alternative. But as I said, if their main concern, their main motivation is to publish in an impact factor journal for the time being, then we have to respect that. And if they do wish to publish other parts of their research, then we'll gladly receive that. And hopefully that way they can straddle both worlds and find a benefit that way, if such a happy medium exists. Yeah.
Sam, yeah, thanks very much for that. I think just to respond to it a little bit, I think there's probably an onus on the funders amongst the room, be that nationally or ForestValue or some of the new partnerships that are coming out, that it's incumbent upon us to integrate open research within our evaluation categories. So there's responsibility everywhere, I think, and it's a shared task that we have to take on board, and we all have to do a little bit more work on, because the problems we're addressing are so large and so vast that it needs an integrated approach where everybody's has the maximum amount of information available to them. So yeah, thanks for that. If there's any other questions, I have one or two myself, but if anybody more important to me wishes to raise a question, please do so. Put your hand up. But in the meantime, just we spoke a bit about early stage researchers, and maybe looking at the other end of the spectrum with regards to intellectual property and open research practices. How do you handle, or how do you see the safeguarding around intellectual property? And are there any strategies that you have, or any thoughts on how you can safeguard IP whilst using open research? Is that a very difficult and unfair question?
Yeah, I can come in again on that. I appreciate
Thanks.
You've heard a lot from me. I mean, we publish everything under a Creative Commons license. And going back to kind of those initial concerns that people had about open access when that was first coming to the fore in publication culture, people would be concerned about their intellectual property getting scooped, because it wouldn't be fully copyrighted. People could reuse their research at whatever extent they like. But the important thing about Creative Commons, specifically in the CC BY license, the attribution license, is that people must be attributed. The original creator of that work must be attributed. And if they aren't attributed, then they're in contempt of copyright law. So the same principles of copyright law apply within open research as they would in any other methods of publication. So your intellectual property is still protected, and people, still be liable should they break or claim your own intellectual property as their own. So it's really important to stress that. And I think some people have concerns about being scooped if they share their data too early in the research process. But again, you are, as an author, you have that moral right to claim that data as your own, and there are functions within copyright law to protect that moral right. So I think the benefits of actually sharing your research sooner far outweigh the risks. And if there are any risks, then those risks are, you do have some methods to go about remedying any bad practice from other researchers. But I mean, anecdotally, there have been projects that have looked at research projects that have shared their data earlier than they've actually published the paper, and it's actually shown that they've had greater citations as a result. So it demonstrates that the rewards are better than the risks in that respect. It means that your research is more likely to be built upon by others, to be seen earlier, and obviously be ahead of the curve of other research projects if you're publishing openly.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, that's very important. Sorry, Rainer, please come in.
No, don't worry. I would actually go probably one step further, even as you said, Sam, that by publishing your data, and under certain circumstances, you can put an embargo on, but under publishing your data, you get copyright protection through these licenses. If you say that available upon request, first of all, not many people are getting data under that agreement that it is available upon request. But even if you get the data, I don't think many people actually send a license with it. So in that case, it is a completely different story, that there is no license between the user and the producer of the data. Yeah, I forgot my other point, but it will come back. Don't worry.
Okay, well, if there's any other questions from the audience? I think we can move to a wrap up and close unless there's any further questions. But on that, I think we can close. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank all of our participants, particularly Sam, Rainer, and Maria, who gave excellent presentations and really added to the depth of this discussion, and certainly opened our eyes and hopefully our minds as well. But also I'd like to thank the CRESTIMB team, Darius and Stefania, for helping out, and then of course our ForestValue2 team. Special thanks to Mika and Kathia for all their hard work in organising and arranging this. So that's the thank yous out of the way, and I think what most important for me, what came out of this is the need for, it's very obvious that we're facing really global challenges, and that open research is essential. This is especially crucial for initiatives like ForestValue2 or any of the partnerships that we're going to be opening up. And when you're addressing, I suppose, multi-jurisdictional issues such as climate change or biodiversity conservation and ecosystem services, the emphasis must be on open research to promote the knowledge that we can all share, and that way we are building on what is out there and what is already done. So, and of course there's accountability within the scientific community as well. So with that, I think, Mika, unless you would like to say something to give a final wrap up.
No, from my side, so very much thank you to everyone participating, especially to the contributors and there. And we didn't actually introduce Katja here, but Katja is one of our main persons in the project as well, in charge of the communication, dissemination, work package, and all these efforts there. So thank you, Katja, for joining and for all your efforts for this event, and to Tony, of course, especially. But otherwise, so I guess that this is most useful, and it would have been interesting to learn from the participating researchers that how much actually do they use these open research platforms and so forth. But perhaps that's in some other occasion we'll do that. I remember that in the past, so we did follow this up with Ore platform, so that how many ForestValue projects were actually using the platform, but that was in the very early stage of the platform. So now we haven't really followed it up, but I guess that is one of the tasks to do for ourselves then also in the future, and when it comes to the partnerships we are developing here. But thank you from my side. So this has been an excellent and very useful event.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. And wish everybody a good afternoon. And hopefully we'll all see each other again in some other capacity soon enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Rainer.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks.